right. Welcome to episode 1 of the Superflow podcast. In this episode, I'm speaking to Noah Bragg. Noah is the founder of Potion. Potion is a tool that helps you build custom websites in minutes. It's built on top of Notion, which is a tool that a lot of people use, including some of you right here. We go over bootstrapping, getting early validation, challenges of growing a venture while working an existing job, the power of building in public, and a lot more. Hope you enjoy this episode, and let's go. All right, Noah. So excited to have you here. And like we were just quickly discussing before we started recording, tell us a bit about Potion, man. What's the 0 to 2K MRR story?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be here and chat. Potion has been a lot of fun. I started that around 6 months-ish ago. And there was kind of a bit of a story, I guess, before like even getting to that idea of how I came to that. My first kind of jump into like the business world, I tried to do like a startup with my buddy from college, and we were really trying to like go like big kind of thing. Like we were trying to make like a unicorn. And so we started a startup called Coffee Pass, and we worked on that for like 2 years, and it didn't go exactly how we were expecting. But I learned a lot through that process. And one of the things I learned was that I didn't really want to go for like a big startup, like grow huge. And it just was kind of pretty stressful in a lot of ways. There's a lot of pressure. And so I just kind of learned through that, like, oh, I don't think I really want to do that. I do like, creating and making businesses. So I still want to do something like that. And that's kind of when I found kind of like this indie hackers community online, and kind of just started to see that like, oh, people are doing this in a different way where they're not, raising a ton of money, putting all this pressure, making a business that's like, oh, it has to be huge for it to succeed. And so I started to try to think of ideas that could make a lot of sense for like a solo indie hacker. Like if I was just going to do this on my own, or maybe grow it to a little small team or something, but make a business that makes sense in that area. And so I think the kind of ideas and kind of businesses that you can create to fit those limitations, I think looks a little different. And so I started to try to think of ideas and things that made sense for that. And one of the things I looked to was building on top of other platforms. I think there's lots of benefits that you can have with building on other platforms where the customer is not having to learn some whole new tool. They're already kind of in the tool that they already know and, that another company supports. But then you build some kind of little extra add-on or something that they need for their use case. There's less for them to learn. In a lot of cases, there's maybe some less marketing that you have to do, because a lot of these platforms have like app kind of marketplaces where people can find your apps and things like that. And so I kind of started looking for opportunities like that. I knew I wanted to do like tools that helped other businesses, kind of like B2B-ish space. But my first kind of jump into that, an idea like this, was called Support Man. And Support Man was built on top of Intercom, that platform, and Slack. And so it was kind of following that thesis that I was thinking through. And it in some ways it worked. In a lot of ways, like I grew it, got around like 10 customers that were paying for it, and people used it. It was a really cool tool where it didn't take much work from me. Like once they kind of installed it, it just kind of ran and worked. There wasn't much support. It just kind of did what it needed to do, which is kind of a great kind of business, I think, for, a solo entrepreneur. But with that, I kind of started to feel like it wasn't growing fast enough. I thought maybe there was more potential somewhere else. And that's when I started to think of other ideas. And that's kind of how I came to Potion, kind of connecting, okay, here's another platform, Notion, that I could build on top of. But also like I definitely saw an opportunity where it's like, okay, this is kind of early for Notion. It seems like everyone loves Notion, which is a great sign. Everyone's talking about it online. But also like they didn't even have their API out. And so it was kind of like early days where it's like, I think that they're going to keep growing. And I think this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to build on top of. And I use it myself. I thought like, this is a great tool. And so I really wanted to build something there. The other thing I kind of found through all these past products and stuff that I've worked on, that the customer that I choose to work for or basically build something for and serve is really important. Like that's kind of like what makes a business fun or not. Like if you enjoy talking with those customers, learning from them, helping them, like that's going to be a fun business to run. And so I kind of found through my past stuff that I really like being around with other founders, other makers, other creators. And so Potion was kind of like a sweet spot for building on top of a platform, Notion, but also getting to serve people I love to help. And I was already talking to those people anyway, so I kind of understood them more. And so yeah, it was kind of a perfect fit for that. And that's kind of how I came to that idea. And like, okay, I think this is something that I should do. So that's kind of the story. Going back, go back a little bit before to kind of help me, the decisions I made to get to that point.
Nice. All right. So this is like you've done quite a bit within that entire thing. But what I like is this entire thinking thought process of having a thesis, and then you sort of, let's say, test it out. Is that something that you do all the time? Is that something that that's how you sort of, let's say, figure out and then?
Yeah. Yeah, like I kind of think of like building a business almost like a science experiment where you have a hypothesis of what you think is going to work, and then you test it. And really everything you do with like building the MVP and like the next steps you take, I think should be basically trying to prove your hypothesis wrong. Like, is this actually going to work? Because, I think a lot of founders go through this, like when they start out, like in my earlier days, trying little side projects and stuff, it's kind of like you kind of romanticize the whole process. And you're like, oh, of course this is going to work. Like, why wouldn't it? Like, this is awesome. And you're not actually testing the things that need to be tested to actually prove that it will or not. You really want to test like that what you're doing is working, because no one, you don't want to work on a product that isn't going to pan out, that's not going to work. And so trying to get to that point of figuring out, okay, am I on the right path, I think is a smart way to go. And so really, I think that's like you want to optimize for learning. You want to optimize for learning, is this going to work? Learning about your target customers, and all the questions, like try to answer all the big questions that you would have about this business and how it's going to work. So that's why I try to do. It's obviously hard to always do that, or hard to answer all the questions, because sometimes you just never really know till you've had the product out there for multiple months or whatever. But that's what I try to do, and that kind of guides me in my thinking of what to do next, what things to work on, and stuff like that.
And so, taking it from there, what do you look at? Like, so you've done this a few times now. You did that with your first, the venture with your buddy, and then the Intercom, the support man, which you built on top of Intercom, and now, Potion seems to be like you're getting a hang of, okay, early validation. Okay. So tell us a bit more about that, because a lot of people, I'm sure, who are listening to this, are going to be founders or other people who are building something. And early validation can be, I found early validation to be either a fake thing. Also, like sometimes early sales can really make you think that it's massively big, or it can also discourage you, or something like that. So what do you look at? I mean, as a practice?
Yeah, so I think it is really tricky, like you're saying. And I think that's because, you don't have much data, especially in the early days. You only have so many customers that you're talking to, working with. You only have so many points of information that you can take a look at. And really, I feel like it's almost more of a, at least for me, I know some people do have maybe more of some kind of data driven approach, but for me, it's definitely more of like a feeling. Of just like feeling, how's this going? And you can take all these different things that are happening. You can take like some research that you're doing, seeing how communities around your space are. You can look at the market to get ideas. And so it's really a feeling, because even, if a entrepreneur looks at those things, they may still not know what that means, right? Like, oh, this market seems like it's big or something, but it's like, what does that really mean for my business? And I feel like really the only thing that has helped me in that is just trying lots of things. After you've tried multiple different products, tried different markets, you start to kind of grow this feeling. It's almost like a muscle that I felt like you start to build, almost like, working out. You're building up this muscle of like knowing, okay, this feels good. This seems like people are really into this. This one doesn't. And just having some past experiences to gauge against of like, people kind of respond the same way in the past, and that didn't work out, or maybe it did work out. And I think that's why it's so hard, because every business is different, every market is different, and so it's really hard to kind of have a straight set of rules or guidelines that work everywhere, right? And so I think kind of building up that muscle, and that's what I would do, if I was starting again, is just trying lots of different things, because I think you can learn so much that way as an entrepreneur, and you start to build that muscle of like figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And so it's not like a perfect answer, obviously, but hopefully that helps a little bit with people who are thinking through that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's with this, it's one of those things where it's a bit of science, a bit of art, a little bit of the question mark machine learning output kind of thing. It's like, okay, so but it's a phase that it's important to understand, I think, for everybody, because early stage can be something which is early validation, especially is a tough one. But like you summed it up, it's like you got to get a feel for it. There's no, I mean, the more you try to sort of, let's say, give it some sort of metrics or these kind of things, and the way it's worked for you probably is, let's say, getting a good feel of what is in front of you through all different kinds of things, rather than trying to go only based on revenue or only based on KPIs and these kind of things. That's pretty good. Which actually brings us to Potion. So tell us a little bit about Potion to begin with, because I'm not sure if everybody who's going to listen to this knows about Potion, and what its role is for somebody who's using the app called Notion. So of course, most people listening to this would know about Notion. It's a let's say note-taking, productivity, sort of, let's say, system management kind of an app. So tell us a bit more about Potion. What does it do? And then we can get into a bit of, let's say, your early days of Potion.
Yeah. So Potion is built on top of Notion, and like you said, like Notion is great for like writing content and kind of putting and organizing stuff together. Companies use it for like project planning and stuff like that. And so what Potion does is it takes that content that you have in Notion and it recreates it as a website. So Potion actually recreates every block, every Notion block, so that Potion kind of has control of it. You can then kind of customize the style. You can change how it looks, but also like Potion can optimize for an actual website. And so every page is statically created, so it's fast, and you can jump around from page to page in your website really quickly, which is something that Notion isn't really optimizing for, because they're doing other things. But yeah, it allows you to make a website with a custom domain, and then you can add your own custom styling and kind of make it your own. And so Potion kind of helps you do this and making your SEO good for search engines. And so yeah, allowing people to create their websites on top of Notion, which I think is it's pretty cool, because Notion's where a lot of people are at every day. They're all already putting in their content and notes there. So being able to turn that easily into their website, I think makes a lot of sense. And so that's what we're trying to do with Potion.
And then how did you sort of, let's say, discover the idea, or how did you come up with it?
So I found Notion, kind of like I was talking about earlier, and thought that platform I just saw a lot of people talking about Notion, and just people really love Notion. And I just haven't seen a tool like that where people just really love a tool and love to talk about something. And I really saw that as like an opportunity where it's like, okay, if I make something for these people, like maybe they'll talk about my tool as well, which, if I can get some word of mouth going, that would be awesome. But the other thing that really triggered me on the website idea was I had seen people already trying to do this. There was another tool called Fruition, which was kind of like a hacky-ish way. People that they probably have to know a little bit of how to put some stuff together, maybe some code and things like that. But with Fruition, they could then basically create a website with a custom domain on Notion. And there was a lot of people already trying to do this. And so that was another thing, like seeing some demand, like, oh, people are already trying to do this, even though it's not optimal, and they're trying to create a website on Notion. So this is obviously something that people want. And so, if I can come in and make that process easier and better, like, I think there's something there. So that was really what kind of made me think about the websites, was seeing people already trying to do this. And, there's a couple other companies that were already trying to jump into the space. So it just made a lot of sense there, along with what I mentioned before, like wanting to serve other creators and founders. And I think, the other thing, if you're going to serve like indie hackers or creators that are kind of just starting, they're probably not going to pay for a ton of things. Like we like, I do this too, as like bootstrappers and stuff. Like we like to, pay for as little as we can, which makes sense. And so I think if you're going to build a business in that kind of space for that kind of customer, it needs to be one of their main tools, something that they're going to be willing to pay for. And like websites is kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, everyone needs a website for their business, and they'll, hopefully be more likely to be willing to pay for that than like a side tool. So I think that made a lot of sense as well. And so that's why I kind of decided to go towards the website idea.
Nice. And so early days, Noah, you got to tell us a little bit about your, of course, get the idea. All of us love to sort of, let's say, brainstorm, come up with an idea. Some of us then go ahead and build something out, but then you got to figure out how to sell that thing. And so what is your thought process, and how did you actually go about doing the first few sales, of Potion?
Yeah. So one of the things I needed to figure out was like how to technically, like how to actually build this, because there were some unknown questions for me there. And so I first started out doing kind of some tests to like, okay, see how I could build this, what would work to build Potion. And I decided from the get-go to do all this in public, mostly on Twitter. I had done a little bit of that in the past with my prior business, Support Man, and I just found that people really like to see the behind the scenes. They like to see what's working, what's not, and it can create. Well, I think one of the coolest things it creates is it kind of creates almost a little support system for you, where people are kind of following your journey, and they want you to do well, because they're seeing the story. And so you kind of have some people that kind of like feel like they have your back. And so I decided with Potion that I was just going to build in public from the get-go. And I actually, especially in the early days, I would create like a little video every day that I shared on Twitter and then on YouTube, of just like the progress I was making, what I was working on. And from that, I got a lot of good feedback, and a lot of people that started kind of following along. But that was probably where I actually got my first like 10 customers, was people that had kind of been following along the journey, that kind of knew what I was doing, and it kind of matched with something that was valuable for them. So it just made a lot of sense. And so yeah, that's kind of where things started. And the plan though was to do like an early access, where only certain people I'd only let certain people in. And the reason I did that was just making sure that the product was good. Like I didn't want to launch a product that wasn't ready and then had, flaws or problems. Because there was, some technical things that I had to figure out and make sure it worked well. So I stayed in early access for, I think, like a month or two, only had a couple people using it for a little while, and then, kind of grew it out more during the early access portion until it seemed like, okay, things are working really well. People like this. Then I decided to kind of launch it to everyone.
Right. So that's, I think, a recent trend that we've been seeing quite a bit, which is, building in public and getting, let's say, just sharing, all the things that you're doing. And of course, you can't share everything, otherwise you won't be building, you'll just be sharing. So I'm sure there's a little bit of a mix of that, but it's good to see that you've actually found, that is a very viable, tangible. Was it somebody who you, let's say, were inspired by, or just sort of saw everybody on Twitter doing something similar, and then you sort of figured, you should do this as well?
So I had actually started I have a podcast and started that around 2 years ago. And So in a way, I was kind of early to this thing in some ways. So I had a co-host, and so we both just every week shared kind of what we were doing in our businesses, kind of updates on the progress we were making, and kind of just sharing the hard decisions or whatever we were going through. And that was kind of the first part of like building in public. We weren't really doing it on Twitter much. But then, so my co-host, he had a little side project that he worked on where he kind of did this thing on Twitter where he just made like a 2-minute video every couple of days, kind of sharing the progress. And that was kind of more the build in public that I saw. That kind of worked well for him. Like people enjoyed what he was doing and stuff. And so I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like maybe I'll do that. And I think it also made a lot of sense with Potion because the people that enjoy like following along build in public are other founders, creators, entrepreneurs, which, you know, has a really good match with my target audience with Potion. So it just made a lot of sense to kind of build in public then, because I would be kind of serving the same people in that kind of that way where, you know, if you have a product that is maybe for someone else that wouldn't like build in public, then maybe it doesn't make sense to spend the time there.
Right.
So.
All right. That's interesting, though. I think since you've been doing it before that, otherwise it's been more recent and people have been sort of, let's say, getting on that train like myself. I've actually just recently seen that and I'm like, okay, that seems to be a cool thing. So you've got your early customers, you got the idea, you got the early customers, and then, you know, now, of course, you want to take it to a little bit further, a little bit, let's say, you're through the validation stage, you're through the piece that, okay, this is making a little bit of money. How do you take it from there to, let's say, 2K MRR, and, you know, what are the plans after that?
Yeah, so I think within the first couple of months, I was able to get it to like 1,000 MRR just from doing the building in public and kind of sharing it. There was another Facebook group that was helpful as well that had like 30,000 people in it. That was a Notion Facebook group, and I was somewhat active on there. So I had some customers coming from there. Other than that was, you know, probably Twitter and the building in public. And so I was getting around to the point where like people really liked it. I had, you know, some customers kind of around me. And so that was kind of the point where I was like, okay, I think it makes sense now to launch on Product Hunt, which Product Hunt, you know, it can be a really good way to launch and just get a lot more eyeballs on your product. And I had a feeling that Product Hunt would be perfect for Potion because there was, you know, multiple different kind of Notion niched products that were launching on Product Hunt, and every Notion one that went on there did really well, like was top 3 of the day or things like that. And so I kind of started to plan out like a month before, like how I was going to do this Product Hunt launch thing. And I was able to get one of the best hunters to hunt my product, which also really helps because all the people that follow that hunter will get like a little notification when that hunter hunts something. And so I think I had Chris, I forget his last name, but he hunted Potion, and he has like 30,000 followers on Product Hunt or something like that. So that was definitely a valuable thing. But yeah, it just kind of took off on Product Hunt, and I think I got around 1,000 upvotes in a single day, and ended up getting Product of the Day and Product of the Week. And that was kind of the next kind of launching point that really catapulted Potion. And I think I went from like 1,000 MRR to 2,000 MRR within like the next 2 weeks or so.
Nice.
And so, yeah, that was really great. And that's one of those things where it's like, I don't have control of that completely. Like, it's kind of just like putting it out there on Product Hunt, see what happens. And I'm thankful that it went well. But yeah, that was really the next kind of thing that really started helping Potion grow, because a lot more people just heard about it through that. And then there was more word of mouth that started going on after that point, and I'm still benefiting from that today. So that was really good for sure.
Nice. And of course, that's, you've got your early validation, and now you've got this piece, sort of, let's say, running, and, the community all behind you, and now you've got all the customers in. but it can also put you off a little bit because it's like, okay, now where do I go from here? You've done the initial, you build the tool, you got the initial validation. Now you put it up on a product hunt kind of thing. You've done the, typical 3-4 things that need to be done, to sort of do this thing. And now, then you sort of, a lot of projects also, hit this phase where they're trying to figure, where do they go from here? And so, what are some plans that you have on, in terms of the product as well as on the revenue side? Where do you want to hit? Because now churn is something that you're going to start looking at, as a SaaS tool.
Right.
And so, what's your thought process about that?
Right. So yeah, I definitely need to kind of figure out like what's the next phase of like getting this to continually grow, which thankfully, it's still growing, but there's definitely a lot I can do to make it grow faster and just keep becoming a great business. One of the things I think will be good for Potion is really kind of like the product led kind of growth, because I think there's a lot of things I could do to the product to make it better. There's a lot of features that people want. And so I think the more that I make it a great product and build those things out, I think the more that people will talk about it, and the kind of the word of mouth will kind of keep going. And so I think I definitely want to keep that going. And I think just kind of some of the focusing on the product will help with that for sure. But I'm also going to need to do some more marketing as well. I think starting to try to figure out some SEO plays that I could do. I'm thinking about making guides and kind of like blogs, or even like some video guides of like how to build different kinds of websites with Potion and Notion. And I think that kind of content, one, like it's valuable, it's helpful to people to kind of know how to do this, but then hopefully there'll be some people that figure out like, oh, this is a cool new way to make websites that I'm interested in or whatever. And so I think that could be a good way to help people discover Potion. So those are kind of the two main things I'm really looking at to kind of continue growing Potion.
Interesting. And yeah, I mean, like the info products and all those kinds of things that you can sort of, let's say, add to that. And, generally like how I think Intercom is a good example where, you've probably seen it, that they have those guides and those kind of things, and that actually plays pretty well with, with the software itself. So for sure,
Yeah.
that's a good way. All right. And then tell us a bit more about your own mindset, man. So through this all, so we've heard about Potion. What's your own, mindset like? Do you have days where, things are going well, and then, or is it because, when you build a SaaS tool and when you sort of, let's say it's more like feature to feature, and then you've got to do a little bit of support. There could be periods where you're brainstorming too much, but then, productivity goes down, or maybe, you gain a customer, lose a customer, etc. So what's your mindset like through this all overall?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I feel like the mindset, the psychology behind like how you're feeling and thinking about like building a business, it's like one of the trickiest things to handle and figure out, especially as a solo entrepreneur doing this on your own. Like you're kind of like hitting these walls or hitting and figuring out challenges on your own. So yeah, there's definitely like days where it's kind of like, man, I don't know how I'm going to how I'm going to do all this stuff. I feel like I just have a lot of things to figure out. And then there's other days where you're kind of like on top of the world and it's like going great. It's kind of reminds me, I heard someone say, so I have kids now, and I heard someone say that like, kids, they're great. Like it makes the highs higher and the lows lower. Like there's kind of like a higher and lower spectrum. And I feel like that's almost similar with a business, where it's like where you own the business, where like if things go well, like you feel like it's great because like you own this and it means more impact for you. But if it's not going well, it's kind of like even lower than like if you were, I don't know, just like an employee of a company or something. Nice. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to kind of handle and figure out with the mindset. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to take it a day at a time. I've noticed that if I get more sleep, I'll feel better about things. So trying to get good sleep. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because motivation is kind of important. Like motivation is definitely important in building business, to helping you feel well, feel good about what you're building, what you're doing. And I think you're way more motivated if things are going well. Like that motivates you and is like, oh, this is working. And so then you're motivated to keep doing it. And so getting through those kind of troughs, those like hard parts where, oh, maybe some extra churn happened or things like that. Kind of just fighting through those parts is what I've kind of had to do a little bit so far, is just like, okay, it's not going as well, but I know there's opportunity here. You kind of have to look to the big picture. Like, I know that there's something here, and if I keep working on it, like I'll get through this hard part. So that's what I've tried to do. And it's, it's definitely hard. It's not always easy, but it's definitely a lot of fun and totally worth it.
Yeah, totally. Of course. Yeah. I mean, as a fellow founder, I can do, relate to everything that you said there. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what you tell yourself. It's like, okay, maybe it's your mind playing games with you, and then you gotta come back the next day, do a few things, and then bang, you get your next result, and then suddenly things are moving again. But who do you sort of, let's say, do you follow people? Do you read about certain things?
Yeah.
How does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I follow some different people on Twitter. I really like to see kind of like the build in public kind of space, see what some other founders, social entrepreneurs are doing. I really look up to Jordan O'Connor, JD Knock on Twitter. I really like how he's built his business, and just how he's built his business with a lot of margin. So he's someone, whenever he writes a blog post, I'm reading it. I really like Justin Jackson and what he has to say about, bootstrapping and stuff like that. I follow some people like that on Twitter. And then I really get some information and learnings from following these different podcasts, like Bootstrapped podcasts, where these founders just kind of share what they're working through, the problems that they're solving. I really love following those kind of podcasts, just because I think you can learn so much from other founders that are in the middle of it and figuring out hard problems. And then, I read some books from time to time, but yeah, that's kind of the information that I take in that, kind of helps me figure out and learn, I guess, how to do this whole business thing.
So it's more of the, let's say, other founders instead of the regular, let's say the gurus of the world that a lot of people like to sort of follow.
Right.
You draw
Yeah,
more from other
probably.
founders. Is that like the go-to? All right. And what are your favorite tools like? So a lot of people like to know about, like, what are the different kinds of tools that you use in general. So Notion, of course,
like
is
used
what
for
you're
the
using.
business.
Yeah, sure. I mean, business or personal, that's fine.
Yeah, so I use Notion a lot, which I think is kind of a requirement for me with Potion. But yeah, I use Notion a lot. I really have started liking this new cool tool called Cold Turkey, which kind of like blocks different apps and websites so that you can like make time for deep work, and I'm not going to get interrupted. And it's kind of a tool that makes that easy, because otherwise I'd be, getting messages or emails and want to be checking stuff while interrupting my product work and stuff like that. So I've really gotten to use a tool like that. Let's see. I really like this new tool I've been using called Llama Life. That's kind of like a to-do task list kind of tool. I have Notion for most of my product management kind of stuff, but Llama Life is just like a really simple to-do list where I just put like the top like 2 or 3 things that I'm wanting to work on today, and I kind of go towards those, and it gives you a way to like kind of time how much you're working on each thing, each task. And so yeah, that's another one I really like using. In terms of the business, what I use for Potion, kind of behind the scenes, I use Versal for hosting the websites. I use Heroku for serving my backend. And then I really like this dashboard tool for analytics called SplitBee. That's where I what's going on. And then for email stuff, I use Upscribe, which is kind of like a MailChimp kind of thing, by another indie hacker. So yeah, those are some of the tools too, and I use.
Great. And one thing that if you had to tell any founder, any indie hacker, or anyone who's listening right now or is going to listen whenever we publish this, one thing that you will tell them, your one best piece of advice for them.
Yeah, I think I mean, really, the main thing is just try lots of different things to figure out what works for you. Like, figure out your strengths, your weaknesses, figure out the kind of people you want to serve. I think trying is the best way to help that. And then on top of that, like, you might as well build in public a little bit, because that kind of just gives you some more signal. Like, you can get some more feedback. You can get some people that are maybe following along that can help you out. So I think that's really valuable. And so, yeah, might as well do that if you're going to go to the work to try different products and stuff.
Great. Nice to have you, Noah. This is short, sweet. Unless you want to add something to this, I think we've covered most of
yeah, no, that was good.
Quick little one. Great. All right.